I'm going to be making a batch of gluten-free, dairy-free bread. And I get my recipes out of this Gluten-Free Baking Classics book by Annalise Roberts, which I had purchased at Bob's Red Mill. I will be using the gluten-free baking flour also out of this book, okay, so I got all my ingredients out, and now it's just a matter of getting it going. In this big bowl, I have my gluten-free bread flour mix, which all the flours that are in that mix I got from Bob's Red Mill. In this smaller bowl, I have a teaspoon and a half xanthan gum, half a teaspoon salt, a teaspoon of unflavored gelatin, and a tablespoon of granulated sugar. Next to it, I have a tablespoon of granulated sugar and a packet of yeast. And the recipe calls for 2 tablespoons of sugar, but I divided them up just because I found that it works better if there's some sugar with the yeast when I put the milk in. Here I have 3/4 of a cup plus 2 tablespoons of almond coconut milk. And back here I have 2 large eggs and 3 tablespoons of canola oil. So the first thing I'm gonna do is put the milk in with the yeast and 1 tablespoon of sugar. And you want the milk to be warm, but not too hot that it kills the yeast. So I'm going to let that sit for a couple minutes just to let the yeast do its thing. And so what you also want to do is have a 8.5 or an 8 by 4.5 inch bread pan, greased and floured. I used Smart Balance Light for the greasing because it's the only spread that I found that, or it's not the only one, but it's one of the few that I found that is dairy-free and gluten-free. And then I used some of my brown rice flour mix to flour it. And greasing and flouring the pan makes it so that the bread won't stick to the pan. And so while I'm waiting on the yeast mixture, I'm going to add the xanthan gum, gelatin, salt, and the rest of the sugar to my flour mixture. And then I'm going to slowly add the eggs and the canola oil. And now I'm going to add the yeast and milk mixture once the top of the mixture is slightly foamy. Then I mix it up really well. I love using Bob's Red Mill flours, and just because it's one of the few places that I've been able to find like a lot of gluten-free flours and a lot of gluten-free stuff that's really good. And being that it's a local company, I like supporting things that are local. And just the fact that it's an amazing resource for anybody who's gluten-free, and also, like, most of their gluten-free, like, flours and such, and like, bread mixes and such are also dairy-free, which is important for me, as I started out being just totally dairy-free, and then in the last 6 months I've also gone gluten-free. So now that I've got my bread mixed up and it looks like kind of like cake batter, it's not supposed to look like normal bread just because it's gluten-free, and gluten-free doesn't act the same way as regular bread. So what I'm going to do is grab a scraper, like so. Scrape off my fork. And then you scrape it into the bread pan. And if you've made regular bread, you know that you have to like knead it and then let it rise, and then, or you set it to rise and then for a while, and then you like punch it and then knead it and then let it rise again. But like I just mentioned not too long ago, that gluten-free bread doesn't act the same way as regular bread, so you totally skip the whole kneading and first rising. And so then you just evenly distribute it into the pan. And from here, I'm going to cover it. And set it in a warm place to rise for about 40 minutes. Now that I've got my bread mixed up and rising, I'm going to wash my dishes, and it's time to get the oven preheated to bake my bread. So I'm going to turn the oven on to 400. And this is what my bread looks like after having risen for about half an hour. So by the time the oven gets heated up, it will have been rising for about 40 minutes. Okay, so now that the oven is preheated, I'm going to stick my bread in the oven for 10 minutes uncovered, and then after 10 minutes I will pull it out, put the foil back over it that I had it rising under, and then bake it for another 40 to 45 minutes.